This episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Blue Bridge Games. For the games and gifts you won't find anywhere else, head to Grand Rapids, Michigan's friendliest local game store, Blue Bridge Games. Blue Bridge Games carries an extensive line of board games, card games, role-playing tabletop games, Magic the Gathering, and more. Stop into their storefront on East Fulton or shop with them online at bluebridgegames.com.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around our water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because, like Sean Murphy, our name has been full of unexpected surprises. And we've been doing these jokes this long, why stop now? My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and we're checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For at Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays. And as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panels and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon Music, basically wherever you get your podcasts, to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to Stranger Things, iZombie, The Good Place, Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Mr. Robot, Charmed, Riverdale, Altered Carbon, The Orville, Outlander, Fuller House, Schitt's Creek, and Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, The 100, The Crown, Supernatural, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, This Is Us, the DCTU series will talk Season 4 of Black Lightning, and the Star Trek 50 Plus series will discuss Season 1 of Deep Space Nine. We'll be launching new panels covering Big Little Lies, Call the Midwife, The Animaniacs, Killing Eve, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, American Gods, Grey's Anatomy, and Cobra Kai. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap, we'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends, we'll cry Bazinga for Big Bang Theory, we'll dive deep into the fantasy world of The Magicians, we'll navigate the witty political satire of Parks and Recreation, and we'll become psychos for Psych. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores, plus we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these semi-quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists, so if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of the outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, as long as you've not prejudged us too harshly and have given us an appropriate number of chances, but then you can have at it. In a nice way, because that's fair. Today, we're around the water cooler and taking a first look at the first season of a multi-season medical drama based on a 2013 South Korean series of the same name. The show is The Good Doctor, and this is the first of a 4-part series in which CPU catches up on this program, which airs its primary run on the ABC network. In this episode, part 1 of this series, we're discussing Season 1, which aired on ABC from September 25th, 2017 to March 26th, 2018, with a total of 18 episodes. We will discuss each subsequent available season in each new episode of our catch-up series. By way of plot summary, The Good Doctor follows Sean Murphy, played by Freddie Highmore, a young autistic surgeon with savant syndrome from the mid-sized city of Casper, Wyoming, where he had a troubled past. He relocates to San Jose, California to work at the prestigious San Jose St. Bonaventure Hospital. Actor Daniel Day Kim noticed the original series and bought the rights for his production company. He began adapting the series and in 2015 eventually shopped it to CBS, his home network. CBS decided against creating a pilot, Because Kim felt so strongly about the series, he bought back the rights from CBS, and eventually Sony Pictures Television and Kim worked out a deal and brought on David Shore, creator of the Fox medical drama House, to develop the series. The show is produced by Sony Pictures Television and ABC Studios in association with production companies Shoresy Productions, 3AD, and Entermedia. David Shore serves as showrunner, and Daniel Day Kim is an executive producer for the show. The series stars Freddie Highmore as Sean Murphy, Antonia Thomas, Hill Harper, Christina Chang, Richard Schiff, Will Yun Lee, Fiona Gubelman, and Paige Sparra, who is the current cast of the show, which recently finished airing its 4th season, though we'll be covering the whole cast through our catch-up series. The Good Doctor has received generally mixed reviews from critics, who have praised Highmore's performance and the series' strong television ratings, but criticized the storylines. The portrayal of autism has also divided critical opinion, and we'll be seeing how our panel feels about that very shortly. The Good Doctor was popularly requested for discussion and beloved by some of our resident couch potatoes, all of whom appear on this panel. In fact, around the water cooler today are 4 of our frequent panelists and your very involved moderator, all of whom are ready to get in the operating room and tackle this tricky medical drama and its many layers of presentation and reaction. As always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have watched all episodes of this series at least through season 1, and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched The Good Doctor, especially through season 1, and plan to do so at some point, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel. They know how this works, and if you've listened to us, you also know how this works, but I'm going to remind them and you, listener, because we got to do our business. What I'm going to ask the panel to do is introduce themselves by their first name, just their first name, not their whole life story, just their first name. Tell us how you came to watch The Good Doctor, what made you start watching, how'd you find out about it, what kept you watching, and then you get to rate your interest along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do. They know this, and I'm going to read that character question, but, panel, are you ready to do this?
I was born ready.
That's good enthusiasm. How about the rest of you?
I wasn't born ready, but somewhere between 3rd and 4th grade I got ready.
All right, fair enough.
I'm ready with a glass of wine. Let's go.
All right. Okay. So how would you rate your interest in the first season of The Good Doctor? This is for the first season because we are catching up. We'll be going season by season and you'll get a new character question each season. So we're going to start with the first season version. And it goes like this. Do you love this show? It's gripping, intellectually stimulating, teaches you a lot about human nature, and encourages you to grow even when you already feel as if you know yourself and the world as much as you're going to know them, like Dr. Sean Murphy. Do you care about this show deeply, but also feel that your soft spot for it may otherwise blind you to its glaring flaws, some of which cannot be ignored or defended, no matter how hard you try? You find yourself giving it more and more chances to prove itself, even when those chances are not necessarily deserved or go against boundaries created by your personal set of TV watching standards, like Dr. Aaron Glassman. Have you been reluctantly won over by this show? At first, you found the premise extremely problematic in light of the fact that the writers chose to depict a surgeon with autism, but also with savant syndrome, in order for the very idea of a surgeon with this disability to be convincing, or because it feels as if it's too much of a stretch from nonfiction or real life. But Freddie Highmore, aka Dr. Sean Murphy, is so impressive, you can't help but find your initial judgment shifting as you continue watching, like Dr. Neil Melendez. Do you find yourself particularly taken in by the Sean Murphy character, but also find that you need an extraordinary amount of patience and understanding to see the benefit and or strengths of this show, no matter how much you try to see the positive side of any problem or equation, like Dr. Claire Brown? Do you enjoy this show well enough when it actually stops to focus on someone besides Sean Murphy? You like the ensemble and the complex characters surrounding him strike you as more interesting than Sean itself. Plus, the occasional sexy romance doesn't hurt either, like Dr. Jared Kalu. After viewing season 1, do you find that engagement with the show is precariously risky because the premise is shaky and you can see all the potential avenues for liability advanced by the fictional situations depicted in the show? For you, it's not about equal opportunity for those with disabilities as much as it is about the health and safety of your own viewing experience, and so you doubt that you will continue watching beyond the first season, like Jessica Preston. Have you given the show a chance, but it hasn't done enough to earn your confidence long term, no matter how winning the ideas and premise behind the story are? Also, you're naturally more pragmatic in your television viewing, and are not prepared to fully invest in a program that does not seem to see what you perceive to be a lack of potentially engaging story over the course of several seasons, like Allegra Aoki? Or do you think this show is a disaster waiting to happen and dislike it strongly, or simply don't care enough about it to have an opinion? You have no confidence in it and are far too preoccupied in your ambition to become hospital president to be bothered to watch it with any sort of focus, though you will also waste no time in exploiting its flaws to make your point, if it comes to it, like Dr. Marcus Andrews. Who would like to start?
I can start us off. I have a single character answer for once. I'm usually mainly this with a scoop of that, but
well, before you get to your scoop, you might want to tell us who you are and how you came to find the good doctor.
If you think the suspense has been built up enough, then yes, I will reveal. This is Micah. Hello to all of my fans out there. Good to see you again, or hear you again, or you hear me again.
That's the longest name ever. So hi, Micah.
You can call me that for short. All my friends do.
Okay.
I started watching this show pretty immediately. I had come off of Bates Motel that was Freddie Highmore's last big project, and I was happy that he was going right into something new because I was afraid he would get hit with the same Norman Bates curse as Anthony Perkins. Mm-hmm. Is that his name?
That's his
From
name.
Psycho? Yeah. So I was happy just to see that he was getting into something because he really won me over with Bates Motel, and I've just kind of been watching since that, staying caught up, and I enjoy it a lot, and as such, I am squarely in the Aaron Glassman zone.
Okay. Micah, what other panels for CPU have you been on?
I'm glad you asked, Kylie. I got my start midway through the run of the Once Upon a Time podcast, where I met the lovely, I won't reveal his name, we'll get to him later, more suspense. And I am also on the Riverdale podcast with another one of our panelists today.
All true. Welcome back, Micah.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
I came to watch the show because I love Freddie. I have always loved Freddie since August Rush, and I always will love Eddie. I have not watched Bates Hotel because I don't do well with some scary shows, and I don't know if that show's scary, but it says Bates Motel, so I'm not ready for that. But other than that, I liked the premise of the show. I liked the idea of a doctor with savant syndrome and all that, and I wanted to see where they took it. And much like my dear friend Micah, I am in the Aaron Glassman zone as well with this show. And I think I answered everything. Mine was short and sweet and to the point.
It's true. Jessica, what other panels do you appear on?
I appear on the Riverdale podcast panel with Micah. I'm also on the Reboot Charm panel. I'm on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina panel, and I'm on this panel, and I was an honorary member of the Once Upon a Time panel.
Because she transported Micah. Welcome back,
Micah's
Jessica.
Transportation specialist.
That's
Get that
right.
resume looking good.
It's good to be home.
Aww.
Hi, it's Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
So I started watching the show because I work in the medical field, whenever a new medical show comes out, everybody's like, oh, you have to watch this, and I did not want to watch it because I watch another major medical show, Grey's Anatomy. I've been on that show since the beginning of time, since season 1, and I'm still, even with watching Grey's Anatomy and loving that, I'm still an ER fan through and through, and no medical show has topped ER. And I'm like, I just can't do it. Well, then I kind of read the premise of the show, and I was like, all right, fine, whatever. So I watched the show, and it has its problems like every other show does. However, I fell in love with the main premise character, Sean. So I kept watching, and I mean, it's kept me watching, and it's been good enough to keep me watching, but I will be honest and say it's not my first show I watch. It's definitely a Hulu show that I watch probably 4 weeks after it's been out. I also like to binge watch the show because I feel like you have to watch a couple episodes to get into it. But also, like my fellow panelists, I'm also a Glassman. Who would have thought? We're all consistent so far.
Okay. Eddie, what other CPU panels have you appeared on? Oh, boy.
I I was one of the originals on Once Upon a Time. I was on How to Get Away with Murder, and we jumped shark. And then I came back and then finished that. And then I was on, oh my gosh, True Blood, Desperate Housewives. And then, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm forgetting something. I'm on This Is Us. And I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I've also written a couple reviews on shows, on a show that can't even remember the name, but I know it was a Latino show, and it was based on a telenovela. That's all I know. Like, I can't remember what it was about. And there's a lot more panels coming up that I will also be on, and I'm very excited about.
You did miss a few, but you were pretty thorough anyway, so welcome back, Eddie.
Yay.
And that means me. I am Jared.
Hi, Jared.
Hey, Kylie, good to see everybody and to be here on the panel. I'm excited about this panel and hearing from all you wonderful people. You know, I just have to say that one of the things you'll see if you listen to some of these podcasts is that there's a lot of consistency to the way that I make my decisions. But generally speaking, I'm a very positive, optimistic person that likes to look on the bright side as much as possible. And I will tell you that I am Dr. Sean Murphy, because as I look at everything there, it's all true. I love the show. It does grip me. It is intellectually stimulating. It does teach me about human nature. Encourages me to grow. So everything in line with Sean Murphy is what I am. So I wouldn't be opposed to the fact that there are probably some glaring things that I don't see, like it says in the second Aaron Glassman's. Yeah, I'm ready to learn and hear from other people. Yeah, Freddie Highmore. I hadn't watched any other shows. I did know he was on Bates Hotel. Watched a little bit of that, but didn't watch very much. To be honest with you, first of all, I love all the hospital shows, a lot of them. I really enjoyed them, so I like that. And I just really loved the premise of trying to do what they were doing with Sean Murphy. I was interested, and I was excited to see what they were going to do with him. For me, I was like kind of in awe just to see what was all going to happen. And with it being a different kind of a take on things, I wanted to see how it was going to go. And I started watching it, and every episode just pulled me in, and I love it.
All right. Jared, what other panels have you appeared on?
I have appeared on Fuller House, and I am currently on This Is Us, which I really love, and then looking forward to some other ones in the future.
Yes. Welcome back, Jared.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And of course, my name is Kylie. As I've already mentioned, I will be both participating on and moderating this panel, as I often do, although it's going to come with a lot of qualifiers. So here we go. How did I come to watch The Good Doctor? Quite honestly, it was because of this podcast. It was because there were people who requested to do the panel. Because if you know me, or you follow the blog, or you follow the podcast, or you talk to me about my unfortunate and forever addiction to TV, #Generation X, you will know that I look to see what's coming out and preview TV shows. We do this twice a year now. It used to be 3 times, but now there's just so much I can only do it twice a year. I look to see what's coming out in the coming 6 months, essentially. And I knew that The Good Doctor was going to be a new show on ABC in the 2017-2018 season. And when I initially screened the trailer, I passed on behalf of CPU. I didn't think that anybody would actually be interested in it. And the reason why is, number one, medical shows are not my number one thing. I did watch Grey's Anatomy for about 10 seasons. When Christina left, I bailed. I was like, that was my favorite character, and I'm done. Boom. Not doing it anymore. I did watch Private Practice because that was a spinoff, and it didn't even last as long as the time I watched Grey's Anatomy. I watched ER in and out, but never all the seasons, or even all of a season consistently. It just was, if it was on, I kept it on in the background. Medical dramas do not typically interest me first. I do like Freddie Highmore, but when I watched the trailer, I thought the trailer that they cut was very potentially manipulative. And I thought, I don't know if this is going to make it more than one season. I would be really surprised if it did. So guess what? I was really surprised that it did. And then long and short, when people become a part of the podcast, or they become interested in the podcast, we now, if you haven't picked it up, people request. They say, I want to talk about this show, or I want to hear about this show, or please cover this show because I think we like your discussions, or we like to participate in those discussions. And all 4 of the people outside of me on this panel right now said, we'd love to talk about The Good Doctor. So I said, okay, I guess I'll watch The Good Doctor and see how I feel. When I pick my interest, though, I think would be Neil Melendez. I wrote that one with me in mind. I do think that there's some problematicness about the premise. But in the end, the reason to watch this show, in my personal opinion, is Freddie Highmore. He is a fabulous actor. He goes back before August Rush. He was the little kid in Finding Neverland with Johnny Depp before he turned problematic. So
don't even get me started on Finding Neverland.
Right? So. I love that movie.
I love it.
I love that movie. And he was such Freddie as young kid performer. And oh my gosh, he was brilliant. I knew that kid was going places. And this is where we are. So ultimately, it's Freddie that draws me into The Good Doctor. And I've only watched the first season, so like our other catch-up series, don't spoil any others, and I'm still in it. I've watched the first season pretty quickly, so I'm kind of getting into it now, but I'm probably going to be a little bit of the naysayer on the group. So much for your consistency theory, Eddie. But before I spill all the beans and review the show in a way that is not conducive to our panel discussion format, it's now time to do the star business, as panelist Hillary likes to call it, or the star rating scale. This is the first time, a first look, we're covering The Good Doctor, so we now get to rate our interest in the show along, this is a standard scale that doesn't change, and it goes like this. And you can, by the way, rate The Good Doctor along this scale at any point you feel comfortable. So if you want to rate it from having watched almost 4 seasons, because we're recording this before it's officially finale'd out, if you want to talk about it after just having watched the pilot, watch the first season, whatever context makes sense to you, do it. But would you say it's 5 stars? Holy smokes, this is the greatest medical drama you've ever watched. It is the best thing to come to ABC since Once Upon a Time. You just don't know what to say. 5 stars. Is it 4 stars? It certainly seems intriguing and you're going to continue watching, but you do see obvious pitfalls in the premise. Is it 3 stars? You're going to give it one more try. There are things you like, things you don't. You're going to see which things are allowed to flourish, so you're really kind of hanging on a little bit for dear life. Is it 2 stars? You've only watched part of it, maybe just the first season. Chances are you're mainly bored, but there is an intrigue or fascination that holds it together, no matter how unlikely. But you just don't see how far it can go. Or is it 1 star? Pass on this one, guys. It's a snoozer. Not funny, not interesting, not your cup of tea. This is really like the worst medical drama that ever was. You cannot feasibly advise anybody to watch The Good Doctor. Pass on this one, guys. There's too many options to waste time on it. 1 star. Who would like to start the star business?
Hey, it's Eddie again. So,
Hey, Eddie again.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Okay. Why?
I mean, I really like how the show really taps on stuff that we should be tapping on, like autism, behavioral issues. In some of the episodes, we deal with that. And I think this show, and I'm sure we'll dive into it more, I think it does really well with the emotional connection of the characters. And I think the reason why is because we have an autistic character, and autistic people are very well in tuned with their emotions. And just the emotion connection with how these characters are and how those dynamics are is what kept me watching. The storyline itself, I believe, actually sucks. And I hate to say this, but every single storyline from there was a woman who had a tumor on her private areas and she wasn't able to have sex again. That happened in Grey's Anatomy in season 4 and she wound up having to have surgery. And then, all the medical drama stuff I've seen before. But the emotional connection and how to deal with a coworker that's autistic, I haven't. That's why I'm giving it 4 stars.
Ideally, I'd want to do 4.5 to reflect.
You can do half stars. Just
Okay, I
don't
will
get
do
cute with your
4.5.
fractions, because I averaged this.
I'm going to do a 4.8762.
What did I just tell you?
763. No, I think that objectively Eddie's assessment is correct. I would be willing to discuss the show with people who rated it a 3. Anybody who rates it as a 2 or a 1, they just aren't perceiving what I perceive, and I don't think there'd be discourse there. So, but objectively, I think a 4 is where the show sits. For me, it's a 5, but that's a lot of the... Pretty much anything that I keep watching, it's because it finds its way into that niche. It doesn't mean that I'm undyingly devoted to the show, but once I'm invested in something, I'm invested till the end, or until... Actually, no, like, you gotta jump 18 sharks, and the last one has to be a megalodon for me to really leave a show behind in the dust. Even the ones that turn bad, I generally will finish for the memory of the good times. I don't think I am caught up, except for maybe a couple of episodes, which I didn't watch while I was catching up on the first season again. I don't think this show has gotten to a point where loyalty is all that's keeping me here. I'm still very invested. As you said, you're not caught up. I don't want to talk about too many things. There's a fluctuation in, I guess, the roster number. And I think for a while, maybe the show wasn't doing super great, or they were just having a lot of staffing problems, but they recently had a big influx of new characters, and I was like, this is good, this is new blood, it's changing the dynamic that all the characters had before to be different, so that's, yeah, for me, still currently at this point in Season 4, I'm going to give it a 4.5.
I'm going to go next and say that I think Micah is my people in this sense, because I'm right where he is. Like, I think that almost 5 stars is good for me. I'm still very invested. I don't see any major problems with it myself. I quite love it. I think there's a little bit of an advantage having watched all of the seasons and kind of knowing how it all plays out. If I would have said this after watching just the first season, I still would have said close to 5, but it definitely gets better in future seasons. But for right now, I definitely say it's still between 4.5 and 5 stars.
So would you like to say 4 3/4, just so I can make that a fraction? Okay, thanks.
Quarters, for sure.
My turn. Mm-hmm. Hi, guys. I'm going to sit heavy in a 4. I like the whole idea of, like I mentioned before, having a doctor who's on the spectrum. I like the whole concept of the show. I have watched bits and pieces past Season 1, so that's where I'm kind of just like, I can't give it higher than a 4 right now, because I'm not sure what happens after Season 1. But I definitely will keep watching it, and I work and have worked with multiple people on the spectrum for whatever, like, high functioning and low functioning, and in between, and I really like that they're being represented now. So that was big for me, was to see kids that I worked with could someday be like, hey, that's like me. So I'm a solid 4.
I am, like I already forecasted, I'm a little bit more of the naysayer. So, and I've only watched the first season, nothing more. I'm gonna say 3.5 stars. So this is between it's intriguing and there are things I like and things I don't. I would say there are more things I like than there are things that I don't like. The things that I like are Freddie Highmore, Sean Murphy's relationship with Aaron Glassman, Sean Murphy's relationship with Claire, and Dr. Melendez, I think is his name, because he is dreamy. He's the thirst trap for me, since we were talking about that offline. And also, I like the fact that his character makes a very progressive evolution through the first season, vis-a-vis not only Sean, but really all of the characters. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics he has with a lot of the pieces of the ensemble. I'm a little less impressed with the Dr. Kalu character. I've seen that actor on other shows. I'm not sure where he's going, and maybe he gets better in later seasons. I'm not impressed with the Marcus Andrews character. I find him... I know we have to have a villain in the mix. I am struggling with the fact that the villain in this piece is the member of a different underrepresented group. It feels a little weird to me. I also am starting to... Eddie was harsher. He's not in frame right now. Eddie was harsher when he said the stories suck. He actually used those words. I wouldn't say that the stories suck, but I do agree that many of them are repetitive from other medical shows. But at least I will give it that it has a nicer spin on it because of the different premise. So I'm going back and forth on this show. I'm into it when I'm watching it, but when I've left it, and it's been a couple months since I finished the first season, I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll still continue to watch it, but I'm not going to be as enthusiastic. So we have a variety of opinions here, and we've already kind of talked about whether or not we like the show right away or not. So now let's really talk about season 1 and what we liked and what we didn't like. Now, I will preface this by saying that unlike Grey's Anatomy, I think The Good Doctor leans more heavily into an overarching arc than Grey's does, but it still has the episodic medical situations that are very indicative of a medical show. So what I kind of want you to think about as we're talking about it is which of the medical episodes and situations were better, which were worse, but also in the season 1 story arc, what did you like and what didn't you like?
Just to tackle the whole thing about repetitive medical story plot lines, I definitely think that's a valid point, but as I was kind of alluding to before we started the podcast proper, these shows have been on all over the place, all different networks for so long. I was wondering, how I wish someone could build, an algorithm that would sift through the plots and figure out this kind of cancer has been done this many times. This many times the woman lost all the feeling in her genitals and couldn't have sex anymore. Although I feel like that one's probably maybe only a 1 or 2. But, just looking at, ER, how long was that on? I was
16 or 17 years, I think.
It was on for 18 years.
There, I was close.
18 years on ER. You got Grey's Anatomy is coming up on, 20?
It just finished 17, so it's
just finished 17.
Yeah, or 16.
You got House.
17, yeah.
You got
17 years on Grey's Anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, House lasted for a while.
House lasted 10 years, I think.
Yeah, there have just, between all of those shows and ones that probably only went a couple seasons here and there's been, I would think, well over 1,000 things. And medical health is always very, very high stakes for the people in real life that are experiencing it. But in terms of keeping things narratively fresh, how many different scenarios can you come up with that are going to be able to drive an episode at the stakes that you need it to out of 1,000+ scenarios? Stuff's gonna get reused. If you wait long enough between the two, people won't even remember. Not Eddie. Mind Like a Steel Trap, he said season 4. He said the exact season of Grey's where the lady had the vaginal problems. That was impressive. I was very impressed by that. But for the most part, I think they can kind of be like, all right, we can take something from season 2 of ER at this point. I think we can throw... And, we've all seen it in all different medical shows. It's formulaic. Whenever things are getting a little slow, car wreck, train crash, something goes over, the ER gets flooded, everybody's like, oh man, and then they kind of restoke the flames from that. But yeah, I'm not nearly as well versed in these episodic medical dramas as some of the other members of the panel, so I like these. These plot lines are still pretty fresh for me.
I feel like honestly, what ends up happening is people get invested in the characters and the lessons and the kind of the things you learn within the episodes. So the stories and plots themselves, they might be repetitive, but I just think that there's always bits and pieces and situational things that I always appreciate. I'll be watching a show and all of a sudden somebody will say something or do something and I'll be like, that made the whole episode for me. So I don't care, because I like Micah said, I've seen it. I've seen almost everything I think I could see. Maybe there is more, but at the end of the day, I love the characters. I love the premise, and I love the fact that they can find interesting ways of telling the same story or different ways of looking at it, the same story. So yeah,
I agree with Jared. As I've been called out, I could tell you when something happened in another show, but I guess it goes back to that famous saying that if it's not broke, don't fix it. So clearly, we just listed all these medical dramas that have been on for years, and we've been recycling some of the same medical issues that they've been dealing with. Clearly, people have been watching them. So we don't fall in love with, we keep saying it, and it really did happen in this season, is a woman not, her genitals possibly not ever working again and having feeling. We've said it a couple times, but it has happened a couple times, and but it's how the characters interacted with that. So yeah, actually in Grey's Anatomy, she wound up dying. Just so we all know, she wound up having a heart attack, and Christina had to like try saving her. So anyway,
R.I.P. Grey's Anatomy, vaginal problem lady.
I'm just saying. Grey's Anatomy is my medical show. But anyway, I agree with Jared that like I'm not watching the show for the medical reason, and like being a medical person myself and seeing stuff like in the medical field, like I watch the show because of the characters, and I want to know how they are gonna act it out. So, or how they're gonna react to it. And I've watched the show for the long term because of how Sean has like dealt with most of this stuff, and how he has to like rethink on how to deal with this because his emotions are so high on multiple levels with all the other characters, which I think we fall in love with the other characters because of how Dr. Sean interacts with them. Like, I actually, the first few episodes, I didn't like anybody but Dr. Sean. I was like, this is a very mellow show. Mostly you get very dynamic characters right out of the gate, but I've only fallen in love with the other characters because of Dr. Sean.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I would be it took me a long time to love any other characters other than Sean and Dr. Glassman. I did love Dr. Glassman from the beginning because, like, I even put some notes down. I said, I love the way he defends Sean. I love the way that he has this wisdom about him that when he speaks so powerfully, and I love the way he was. Yeah, so Aaron Glassman and Sean from the beginning I loved. The others took me some time. In fact, one of the things about this particular series is I found the character development very interesting. There's a number of these characters as you watch. This character development is very good. I personally like it because you go from either from not liking somebody to loving somebody, or I just love the way it kind of messes with my brain a little bit. You think that you won't like this person, and later on you find out, well, I do like them, or vice versa.
Really quick little, it's a slight disagree with what Eddie said about the plot lines being mellow. One of the points, like rewatching this season, things that stuck out at me that I wanted to bring up specifically for this, especially for you guys who have only just watched the first season. The first season it goes a little too hard in the paint. Sometimes starting off, especially with like character stances about Sean. I will say the show hits its stride like as it moves forward, but like looking at this first season, like some of the stuff was so like the him getting like shoulder tackled by the security people in the airport when he's saving the kid in the first thing. Like, he could have very easily, and I don't think there's any reason why even a person on the spectrum would not have just said, like, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
Help me out. And they would have helped him out. That was very obvious drama baiting. And other things, like, it's just, like, characters would be like, he has autism? What? Like, that, a lot of that will get mellowed out. Once I think they found, like, okay, now we're developing all the characters, we can just have their stories be their stories. We don't need, like, as you said, Kylie, I can't remember, Marcus. He has, like, to take on the role of the antagonistic force. Even that, well, they kind of are able to let go of once there's no longer a need for, like, a bad guy. It's just like, now we're just dealing with life and the goods and the bads of that.
The fact that he wasn't going to be accepted right out of the gate, I wasn't surprised.
Imagine if the show had just ended. If they'd just been like, no, we're not letting this guy be a doctor, and that's the pilot. That's the bold move.
Obviously, they weren't going to do that.
You're right.
But I hate to cycle back, but on the whole thing of, like, the different medical shows that have come out, I was a big ER girl with my mom, and then into Grey's for a little bit, and then Christina left, and I was like, okay, bye. But what I like about it is things that they tackled in ER get updated in the new shows, because ER happened in the 90s. Like, so they can tackle some of the same issues, but it's going to have different outcomes now in Grey's or The Good Doctor, or Micah brought up New Amsterdam earlier. Like, those medical shows can all take those storylines from the 90s and then update it to whatever it may be now. But I'm also big on the whole, it's the characters, because, like, I love Sean, I love Dr. Glassman, and I love Claire. I don't know why, but I love Claire. And so, for me, like, when all of them were saying it, I was like, yep, I agree with all of them.
Well,
but I also love ER.
You're a very heart-driven person. I think you latch on
Don't give away my secrets, Micah!
you latch on to the empath of the ensemble.
I do.
That's very much Claire.
But I feel like you're forced to like Claire. Like, you're forced, like, the show forces you to like Claire. If you go, I don't like Claire, like, you don't have a heart. Like, I just want to throw that out there.
And if you tried to maintain that status, they were like, things are getting a little too cushy for Claire. Let's bring in anti-Claire. And then they drop, I'm shorting on everyone's names. Why can I not remember her name right now?
The blonde girl.
Yes, she's big.
Oh, well, that's her real name, Jessica.
No, not Jessica, the safety assessment person.
This
lawyer.
is what happens when you don't put people in the question with the character
I know,
descriptions,
well,
Kylie.
because she's not part of the regular cast in season 1. That's the secret to the character question.
Dr. Resnick, that is her last name.
All
Don't
right.
remember her first name.
Yeah,
we'll
me
get
neither.
there. But yeah, no, she's very much I'm a career woman. Logic points, this and that. Everything's calculated. And then Claire has to come to grips with, like, am I just a big soft ball? Yes, I think so. Is that going to work? Maybe not.
Ultimately, so we're spending a lot of time on the recycled medical plot piece, and the only thing I will say is that I don't watch enough of them to know that. But at the same time, so one of the things, and I'm going to kind of fold in the critics question too, because this is an odd show in the sense that many of the shows we cover are either going to be very cult high status, like probably no critic is going to like them, but they're beloved by fans and we have fans, so like comic book shows and sci-fi fantasy, the ones that don't get the typical love, we tend to cover a lot of those. But then if they are more into the mainstream, less cult-like, then they're high-rated, huge shows like This Is Us, for example. I think The Good Doctor is one of the first ones we've done where it has fan support, but not necessarily critical support, and it doesn't fall into that cult status place. So the critics are fairly mixed on this. There's a lot, it's like a 60%, 50 to 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like a 59 on Metacritic. So it's very much in the middle of the road. And a lot of the common things, which I said in the intro, really come down to, yes, Freddie Highmore, great. The rest of it, we're struggling with it. And I find myself kind of agreeing with that, not because I think things are recycled. To me, that's not necessarily the bit, and maybe if it gets better in later seasons, I won't have the same thought. But as watching season 1, Micah, you definitely hit on yes, they were driving all cylinders on, he's autistic and doesn't know how to doctor bit. And then we also had a lot of the shenanigans and hijinks. They were it felt like they were copying Grey's Anatomy. They were sleeping in the on-call room, sexual escapades. There was, all the different sort of things. But then you add in, it's great that he's on the spectrum, but is it a really fair portrayal of somebody on the spectrum? Which is kind of the question that is being grappled with. Because you either get a Rain Man scenario, typically, with this kind of character, an autistic character, where he's not a savant necessarily, he's just very, very smart, and he's autistic, so he has whatever comes with that. Or he is a savant person who is just greatly smart, greatly intellectually, probably superior to most people, but has this other piece that sort of compromises it. And it's overcoming that adversity, quote unquote, to make sure that he fits in with the rest of the piece. So you've all mentioned that the representation is great, and I agree with you. I'm still struggling with, and maybe it gets better and you can speak to that without spoiling it, but I'm still struggling with the idea that it's almost the linchpin around everything that happens, and how long can that really be interesting?
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's the reason that I don't watch Monk. I watched the first season of Monk, and every single episode, their investigation would come up moot. He'd go home, see a pillow tilted at the wrong angle, and be like, I've solved the crime! And I was like, this is maybe good representation for OCD people, but this isn't interesting to watch. Whereas I'm much more on the side of Psych, even just because it shows you see the clues as he sees the clues. The mystery is built, the answer was something that was accessible to you even, possibly. And that, just as a disclaimer before we jump into this, which is the big elephant in the room for this show, I, to my knowledge, am not on the autism spectrum. I do not have any kind of wealth of knowledge to be able to speak on such things. I understand that it is problematic to have someone who is not on the spectrum portray people who are. But as I said in my Aaron Glassman character thing, that I love the show too much, there's going to be some glaring problems that I'm too close to it to be able to subjectively tackle those things. And Freddie Highmore's performance is simply just, it's the reason I think why. I think if there was not as good of an actor, the show just wouldn't have gotten off the ground because it would have been too problematic to get going. But that being said, I think that the way they differentiate between him just being a competent doctor and the savant syndrome kind of kicking in is with those visual representations when he's kind of seeing the spatial awareness of where everything would be in this person's body, of like, these veins are going here, so the blockage must be there. Those, I think, are the moments where it's the savant syndrome, but then there are all these other times where he's just doing the work that a doctor does because he's capable of doing it. It's not all savant all the time. It's just that's kind of peppered in there for some of the bigger problems.
That's a really excellent point. I forgot about the visual representations. I actually really like that. It reminds me of something, maybe A Beautiful Mind a little bit. I think there was a little bit of that going on, but with math in that movie. And this time it's anatomy, and that's interesting to me that they decided to do it that way. I think it also sets up some really nice camera shots for those of you who like cinematography and the directing of the piece. It kind of gives it does give it a little bit more gravitas and makes it feel a little bit more, even though it's kind of a fantasy depiction, it almost gives it a little bit more realness when they do those little cutouts, those visual ways where he's sort of watching it unfold in animated style before him.
That's amazing. I love the way they do that. I see a couple of things here. I see that we've kind of got these two camps where there's these people over here that they want to kind of be able to critique, how real is this? How close is this to the real thing? And then you've got another camp that's like, this is entertainment for me. So I like to try to fall in right in the middle there. Like I think it's super important to try to represent the real life struggles of somebody with these kind of struggles, but at the same time I just really enjoy watching people act. I enjoy how well Freddie plays the part, and in knowing people with autism and savant kind of stuff, I just feel like he does such a great job, and somebody else might disagree, and that's okay, but I just feel like it's interesting to look at it from both perspectives, but I try not to get too caught up on one way or the other. But the visual representations are amazing because, like me, even for me, it gives a better perspective of what's actually going on inside of his head. And I think when you watch, it really helps people to kind of get a better idea of what's happening. And why is he pausing? Why isn't he speaking? But it all kind of makes sense when you put the pieces there.
And I just want to be clear that for me as a viewer, it's not whether or not I believe somebody with autism with or without savant syndrome could be a doctor or a surgeon. I want to believe that really anybody who can work and adapt with limitations should be able to do it if that's what they want to do. For me, it's more how the show hit on it and meditated on it and really meditated on it over in season 1, and not finding as many of the heartfelt moments, but maybe they come out later. There's a lot more of it really was. And Micah sort of explained it earlier with the Marcus character. He's one of the main focal points, but he's not the only one. He just happens to be the most vocal one because they needed some sort of force to be that person. But it really is, for a long time, in every episode, like, should he be doing this? Can he really be doing this? Like, I don't know if he can do this. And that's great dialogue once, twice, 3 times, but this is... As 18 episodes proceed by, they really don't start shifting away from that until the last couple of episodes in this season.
I agree that they very much so drive, like, he has autism, he's savant, like, hitting on that. But what I liked was that they didn't overplay Dr. Sean and make him, like, non-believably that character, if that makes sense. Because there are shows that do that do have people that don't have whatever it is that this character is supposed to have, and they camp it too much. They overplay it. Whereas I feel like with Dr. Sean, like, it's there, it's the lack of eye contact, the not wanting to be touched, the telltale signs of somebody who is on the spectrum, but it's not like, bam, in your face. Like, oh, he's not looking at me. So, yeah, I feel like they drive it home too much, but they don't overact it. Okay. In my opinion.
I do have to say that David Shore, who's one of the main writers on the show, he got a lot of applause for doing a lot of research for the show. And this name means a lot to me because she wrote my psychology book for my nursing rotation. But Melissa Reiner is a autistic researcher and developer and she has many facilities where she teaches families how to deal with autistic children. And she helped develop Dr. Sean before the character was even casted. And I actually found that out before I watched the show, and that's the main reason why one of the other main reasons why I watched the show, because I like how they took the time to do the research. And it's true. I've worked with many autistic children myself working in the medical field, and you don't know if something's from the spectrum and something's not from the spectrum, how their reaction is. However, for the podcast and for the season 1, I feel like they had to over-exaggerate him being on the spectrum, so we knew that they took the time to develop the fact that he was on the spectrum. Because I feel like I agree with many of the podcasters that it was thrown in your face in season 1. It was overthrown in your face. But I feel like it had to be overthrown in our face so that we knew that they took the time and the effort and the energy and the research to figure out how he should act. Because, the show gets a lot of criticism because, Freddie doesn't have autism. How does he really know how to actually act? And I hate to compare it to this, but it's almost, I look at it as, how does a straight character playing gay who gets called racial slurs, how do they really know how to react to that when they don't deal with that in real life? That's what I compare it to because, as a gay man, I've been called many racial slurs and many derogatory things. That's how I felt with the show. But I agree with you guys that the autistic aspect was definitely thrown in our face in season 1.
Although one thing that I think we talked about how they kind of differentiate between what's the savant syndrome and what's just him being capable. They also, in those last couple of episodes, touched on the difference between what is error. Is it caused by him being on the spectrum or otherwise? I don't think actually in this first season there was any specific really bad thing that happened that was because of the way that his autism manifests. And that I think was the biggest important thing for that last episode was nothing about his condition is what made him make that error during that surgery. That was just an error. And these are medical residents. They're just working in a hospital in a full capacity. They're all going to make mistakes here and there. That's just how any kind of trade works. Mistakes are getting made. It's unfortunate that it's people's lives on the line, but I like that they had it just be something that he accidentally did, because it's surgery. Accidents happen. It was something he accidentally did, and then having him and Glassman both kind of let's face the music, because it's not, if we try to cover this up, we are kind of admitting to something about the autism. I'm not sure exactly what, but if they had tried to hide that from Andrews, that would have been, I think, a little cheap, and it would have kind of devalued what they had been trying to do by bringing him to the hospital in the first place. Not to spoil too much for you first-time people, he doesn't get fired from the hospital in season 2, because we're in season 4. That'd be a rough ride. I'd be impressed with the writers if they could. No, we just moved him to a totally different hospital. No, he stays employed at St. Bonaventure. And also to correct earlier, Marcus Andrews and Dr. Morgan Resnick. Morgan is the evil, I referred to her as evil Christian Chenoweth when she first came on the show, because there's a lot of that same energy, but just in a very negative way.
She's younger, right?
Yes.
The blonde doctor. She reminds me of a grown-up Kitty from Glee.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
See that?
I agree.
Because when she came on, I also had to look up to see if it was Kitty from Glee at first, because I was like, nope.
The voices are a little similar.
I'm not here for this today.
Kitty would be a doctor. That would be that would happen to us.
Just to be annoying. Just to be like, oh, so you were a cheerleader and a mean person, and now you're a highly successful doctor. That's great. Thanks.
Perfect.
I came to this 10-year reunion to get back at you, but you're doing even better. That's awesome. Love that.
I had to say it. It has been on my mind for a minute.
We already looked back at Glee, so sorry, people. But thanks for that, and please find our Glee podcast. It is currently out of the sound feed, but is archived at the website or on YouTube. Anyway, about The Good Doctor, the show that we're talking about.
Right.
I buy all of this. I mean, ultimately, these are all very good things, and I'm heartened to know that maybe there's an equilibrium that's coming in the subsequent seasons that might feel a little bit better to me, and I'm looking forward to that. I think ultimately it comes down to Freddie Highmore. I mean, he is brilliant. He doesn't have autism, and that's a larger discussion about who represents whom as far as being cast in things.
And that's, how far can acting go within acceptable bounds. Exactly.
And I don't think there's a magic wand answer for that, and I don't think it's even something that's worth it for us to talk about here, because it's been there, done that, and there are 4 seasons in, and Freddie is still playing this character. So whether you agree that he should be playing this character or not, that's a different question, and we can tackle it if you want. But what I wanted to do was really just ask, because again, from a plot perspective, I don't think that season 1's arc plot is all that necessarily cohesive, other than some people, the 2 camps that Jared referred to earlier, but from an inside the show perspective. It was the people who didn't think he could do it because he's autistic, and the people who thought he could do it because he's autistic. And then there is a sort of a third, smaller camp that started off in one and became part of the other, and were on a constant sort of trajectory as the season progressed, namely the Neils, for example, and maybe even the Claires a little bit. I think she was skeptical at first, although she liked Sean, and then came along for the ride because of her feelings and her empathicness and her idealism and wanting to believe that people can do well. So
yeah, her big journey in terms of Sean was, I think, about half an episode long.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, nope, my compassion won. Who would have guessed?
So I guess
why I find it so important to stick with it when you watch shows like this is because every show is a little bit different in terms of how long it takes them to build up the characters and stuff. And honestly, I've come to love the show more and more because of the way that they've built up the characters. And definitely, without giving anything away, I feel like they do a very good job. Kind of, it becomes, even though Freddie always remains kind of this amazing part of it all, there are definitely a lot of stories along the way that get very good, and you're not just watching. I don't feel like you're just going to continue to watch just because of Freddie. I think others will come out, and other stories will come out that I think you guys will be able to love and latch onto it.
I think it's a slow burn, I would say, because even just in going into season 4, I think Morgan is just now kind of getting a little bit more depth, although she did have some her own like big plot things as well. I don't know that anybody who stays on the show gets left behind development-wise. I'm fairly certain that everyone who has stayed on the show since season 1 has been fleshed out very well. Especially, I love Park. We were talking, one of the questions in our thing was, who are some of your favorite characters and why? I don't know why, but Park, just straight out of the gate, I loved his presence. I love that actor. He played the original Takeshi Kovacs
on Altered Carbon.
Season 1, I'll just say.
Which we also cover on the CPU podcast.
Plug time.
We always get one of those every episode.
At least one.
It's your podcast. You can throw those in after every sentence if you'd like.
That's right.
Might be
tweet it. Hey, if you would like to know what else we covered, tweet at us at CPU Podcast.
But yeah, no, I loved Park straight out of the gate. I think I like the actor that plays Jared better than how the character was written, at least in the beginning. That's kind of like a sad thing is, as you probably have guessed, his character is on track to not be on the show anymore because of dramatic things. The writing for him got better after we were past the turning point. Like, after we kind of knew he's not going to make it, then they got him to a point where I was like, but no, I want him to stay.
I agree.
What did I just watch him on? What have I just been watching?
So you haven't seen him on anything else. So when you said you'd seen him before, I was intrigued.
That's a good name.
I think he was on Better Call Saul, because that's like the last drama that I've watched. Or maybe it wasn't Better Call Saul. I just watched No, it was Westworld. He was in Westworld Season 3. No one cares. Okay, we also cover Westworld on the CPU Podcast. Look for that.
I really liked Season 1, but then I fell off, and it's really, I don't have HBO, and I don't want it, so it's
It's no judgment-free zone. So, when it comes to The Good Doctor Season 1, though, because keeping in mind you wanted to cover this season by season, what would you say are the best parts and the worst parts of this first season? Because I don't have a lot of in-depth questions beyond the premise and the critical reaction. And
for the viewers at home, Jessica just very visibly showed excitement that she wanted to speak.
I don't know why. So, my favorite episode, and I just looked up the name of it, and I've already forgotten. Because, I got so excited that I forgot. Is it Burnt?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no, is it not Burnt Food? No. Is that where they already talk about his brother?
No.
I'm talking about his brother on the second episode, I think.
Yeah, they're pretty quick out of the gate with the Steve stuff.
Well, the episode where, it goes into depth.
Oh, that's the second episode.
I think
that is the second episode, where they talk about, he remembered, what?
Died?
Yeah, where Sean talks about he remembers the smell in the air, because that was the day his bunny died.
Yeah, that was when they were interviewing him.
That's only the first part of the story. There is a second episode where it goes very deep into the...
Yeah, it's the episode where it goes deep into it.
I'm looking for it.
For some reason, that was my favorite episode, and I don't know why. And now I feel bad that I can't remember the name.
I'm looking for it. Hold on.
They established that the brother dies in the first episode. I don't think they told us how until the episode she's talking about.
Correct.
Which I also don't know which one it is.
I thought it was episode 2.
I don't think so.
No, because I hope I'm not jumping into season 2, am I?
No. It happened in this season.
Because
it's 0.3%, episode 5, because the young boy Evan is a patient that looks like his brother, and it starts to trigger all the memories.
Yes.
So the synopsis is, Sean notices a young boy Evan who has an uncanny resemblance to deceased brother Steve. Was brought to his hospital by his parents for a possible fracture to his arm. We discover he's actually suffering from terminal bone cancer, and Sean attempts to find another diagnosis to save Evan, and it's all about how Sean believes he can save Evan when he couldn't save Steve.
Yes, and I love that episode because they also didn't they keep it from Evan that he had cancer?
The parents did, yeah.
They kept it from him, but he already knew, and he kept it from them, and then all the secrets.
I don't know what it is about that episode, but that was the episode that was like, I'm going to stay watching. And I think it was because the child's acting was amazing, first of all, because he was like, no, I know I'm sick. They don't think I know I'm sick, but I know I'm sick, and I know that this is going on. But also to see that turmoil in Sean about, I couldn't save my brother, but I'm going to save this little boy. And to see that, to see him step away from, I'm Dr. Sean, I'm a doctor at St. My brain just fogged out for a second there, but to see him go from that to, reverting back to a human who's not a doctor, who lost a brother, and just wanting to save this person because Sean himself is a person. I don't know, there's just something about that episode that stuck to my heart, and I was like, I'm committed.
I agree with you, actually. That is probably the turning point for me for the show, because at first I was like, ooh, I don't know, and now it's time for true confessions. We actually had somebody potentially on this panel who ended up dropping off because he didn't keep up with the show. I started to look for a moderator, so I started with him. And he said no, and actually I didn't finish watching, so he left. And then I talked to panelist Eddie, who also has done some moderating for us. And I said, do you want to moderate this? He's like, I don't know if I can. I mean, I'll be on it, but I don't think I want to moderate it. And I was like, oh shoot, I don't know what we're going to do here. And then I got to that episode, and I thought, okay, I think I can do it. And because it gave not only backstory for Sean, but also more of a scan into how he comes to know. You know, Dr. Aaron Glassman, we should mention, is played by Richard Schiff, who is most well known for his role on The West Wing, for those who are big fans of The West Wing. And he brings no less of his gravitas to this role. I thoroughly enjoy Aaron Glassman, and the relationship, I think that's probably the core and heart of the show for me, and what makes this good drama and different as a medical drama is that there is this key, very heartfelt relationship that very much looks like father-son, because you learn that Sean's father particularly was not accepting of his differences as he was growing up, and that Steve and Sean ran away from home because there was abuse in the home, and you learn all of that. And then you also learn that Aaron, Dr. Glassman, kind of finds him and takes him in and mentors him throughout his life and is the one who got him the job at St. Bonaventure. And it's that relationship that I find myself most drawn to throughout all 18 episodes. So to that end, the season finale here is my favorite. We learn that Dr. Glassman is dealing with a life-threatening glioma, and Sean becomes thoroughly obsessed with, which is why he makes the mistake in the operating room, thoroughly obsessed with trying to solve and to cure and to find the cure for Dr. Glassman because of this. There's this whole exchange where they actually say I love you to each other, which was part of this whole other previous conversation. And it was very heartfelt, and this episode, even though it's the last of the season, is the one making me say, okay, I gotta watch more now, I guess. Sure.
We've been talking about what's the season arc, because they kind of did have to leave it at like, welcome to the drama, will he stay at the hospital, will he go? None of that will culminate at all until this final episode, because we have to take the journey of improving whether or not he's competent. There is that other arc, I think, between just Sean and Aaron's relationship, because it's somewhat paternal, but it's been long distance for years and years and years, so it's even not really the same. So we see not only Glassman first going up to bat for Sean, but then kind of realizing his own ineptitude when it comes to, can I be the support system for this person? I don't think I can, I gotta get him, I have to shove somebody else or shove him onto somebody else. And that's when I kind of lost some distance with Glassman's character. I sided with Sean in that. He seemed desperate almost to get someone else to be the support system. And I can understand not wanting to be somebody's only person, but if he had just looked objectively at Sean's life, even at the hospital, he would have realized he's already building his own net of people who can be there for him. But
there's also that mirror because of Aaron and his daughter, right? Isn't it his daughter?
Yes. He passed away, I think, when she was like 15 or something
He
very,
was
very
young.
young. So maybe he was feeling, maybe Sean is his Steve in that he thinks, I failed to save someone before.
Correct.
I will probably fail again. I will say the acting that actor, I forgot the name he said, that he laid down during those last two episodes was exceptional. I don't really follow the Emmys, but I hope he was at least considered in some of the conversations behind nominations for that year.
The show was actually nominated for 5 after the first season.
But not Richard.
Oh, that's...
No, he wasn't.
Mostly
But the
Freddie.
show was nominated for 5.
I think he did really great, and by the end of the season, you do have it coming to a point where they're both kind of accepting that we can just be there for each other. It doesn't have to be this kind of all or nothing type deal. We can find the balance, and that's really what the show is about. It's about Sean finding the balance in just life in general. Well, I guess I summed it up, so we only need to do the other seasons. I feel like
Well, if you have no other least favorites or most favorites, I can at least ask you some of the first look questions if you're ready for
I don't
those.
like Jessica.
The only thing I want to
You
point
mean
out,
Jessica on the show?
I know, I was like, wait a second, what?
No,
Because this
Yumi
is
is still cool.
controversial
Jessica on the show.
and scary.
She's fine. There's not really a reason. She just doesn't do anything for me in the dynamic besides give background to
It took me
Glassman.
all 18 episodes to realize that she was Aaron's granddaughter.
Because you get one scene at the track.
I know. I was like, who the hell is she and why do we care about her? And I don't care.
Who did you just say that you think she was?
Richard. Wasn't she Richard's granddaughter? Aaron's granddaughter.
No, she went to school with his daughter. She's just a friend.
She's a friend.
See,
She's a colleague.
I did not get that either. it was all like, why
So
does
19 episodes including the podcast.
So why does anybody care about her? Also, she has no chemistry with the hottie that plays Neil, and so I'm whatever.
Are we just going to call him Dr. McHottie?
Dr. McHottie, yes. So
Feels
why?
Hashtag
I don't
Dr.
care that
McHottie.
they're getting a divorce. That's probably a good thing.
Once again, this isn't big spoilers because it's not about anything dramatic. As I said, there will be roster shifts. They're going to lose most of the kind of extraneous grown-up people. I believe Aoki leaves fairly soon. Jessica leaves fairly soon, and it
Which
just
is
kind of
sad because Tamlin Tomita plays Aoki,
I like her.
Well, and
I did
also,
like her.
she's been in a variety of films. Her first film was The Karate Kid Part 2. She played Danielson's girlfriend in Okinawa.
Nice.
Oh, awesome.
Good pull, Danielson.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, for the show, they just...
Previewing our Cobra Kai episodes.
I liked what they did for, like, we're going to have this rounded out ensemble. It's not just going to be about the residents. There's going to be bigger things that play. I just don't think they found a way to do it very well. New Amsterdam, I think... just the sheer number of main characters that New Amsterdam has and maintains. Maybe if we do a podcast, I'll talk more about that. It's very, very balanced, surprisingly so. With this show, there were just those characters that fell by the wayside, being primarily Jessica and Aoki. They both.
P.S. If you want us to cover New Amsterdam on CPU, Mike has already requested it, but he's the only one so far, so help him out. I do want to add that before we get into the first look questions, that at least I appreciate the fact that not only does this show cover an underrepresented person who has a disability that normally wouldn't be in this profession, but it's also just a really honestly come by diverse cast of different
diverse
people.
Diverse as heck, boy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, it's so, I will give this show A+ points because it's so natural, and I wish people would just do this generally speaking and just make it happen.
There are 3 main characters that are white?
Yep.
Out of like 8?
Yep.
8 to 12? Yeah, it's and it doesn't feel at all like they shoehorned it in. It's natural.
It's natural.
Me just wishes there was more plus size representation. I don't know if that comes up in later seasons, but beggars can't be choosers.
Fair.
Yeah, fair. Look, there's
think
only so much progress that can be made.
Yeah,
You know what, though? Not to touch back on another show, it's getting it in This Is Us, so I guess I can't complain.
I was just gonna say, you need to watch This Is Us.
I can't.
And then listen to our
I'll
podcast
message you
episodes
later,
on which
Eddie.
Eddie and Jared appear.
I will message later why I can't watch it, because it's a sad sob story, and that's not what we're talking about right now. So, I will message later about why I can't watch This Is Us.
Couch Potatoes United, it's all laughs all the time.
I hate to circle back on the episode that we love. I'm so sorry. But I have to say what made me fall in love with the concept of The Good Doctor was episode 1. When he was in the airport and just how, like, they showed the visual concept of how he wanted to do everything that he did is what made me fall in love with. And I mean, we've talked about it, the visual concept of, like, in his mind, how he thinks is something that we haven't seen. And I fell in love with that. I can't say that I'm in love with the show. And I mean, I've said it a couple times, like, the show is, I feel like, is repeating itself. I'm only on season 2. But, so, anyway, I'm only repeating season 2. I'm actually caught up, but I'm repeating, for the record. So, anyway, I really I fell in love with the concept of where we were going to take this character who was on the spectrum and where we were going to start them with episode 1, which speaks volumes because normally I don't get where a show is going until about the 3rd or 4th episode. But, I mean, I'm not in love with the show itself, but the concept that they have is what keeps me watching. And I know that's a question you're going to ask, Kylie, and I'm so sorry.
Not exactly, but thanks for segueing me into the first look questions. This show was developed by David Shore, as we've mentioned, who also created House, as we've mentioned, Battle Creek, which we actually have covered on this podcast. It was a one and done. And let's see. And Sneaky Pete, which was on Amazon Prime and was canceled after 3 seasons and starred Giovanni Ribisi. Does watching The Good Doctor make you want to watch any of his other shows, past, present, or future? Why or why not?
I've actually watched them all. I've watched them all.
I watched Battle Creek, but that was more because of the fact that it was set in Battle Creek, Michigan.
It's actually the only reason I watched that show. So.
I've watched House.
Yeah, I've seen House here and there.
I enjoy
think
House.
That show had its own ensemble problems.
Yeah.
I think that the two, I don't remember their names because just so blah, so very blah. The one dude who's like a low rent Bill Pullman, and then the woman who is the antagonistic force to House and kind of the only thing that keeps him in check. Both of them I feel like could have gone the way of Jessica and Aoki. I didn't. Just House and his residence was all that I needed for that show and worked for me for that show. So I didn't know. Maybe he's learned. I think.
After I watched Nurse Jackie. I watched Nurse Jackie and somebody was like, oh, if you like her drug addiction, you should see this doctor with his drug. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I still like Nurse Jackie better, just in case we're all wondering.
Okay.
You're talking about the writer. Would we like to watch another show from the same writer? Not
Creator and head writer, yes.
Believe it or not, the strange thing is that I've tried to sit down and watch House all the way through, and I've watched many Houses. The episodes, not all of them, but I watched many, and I liked every one, but for some reason I didn't, for one reason or another, and I still don't know why. I didn't get hooked. Maybe it's just because I didn't consistently keep watching. I think I'm like one of those people that if I don't intentionally keep watching, then I just get distracted with other things and I don't come back to it unless something really pulls me in. I know House was very good. I haven't watched any of his other shows, I don't think. I'm always interested in trying something else. But I also have learned that even though a writer is so great in one show, they're not necessarily great in another. So far, I've experienced that with Grey's Anatomy in terms of they've got this new Rebel show. And while I've not watched enough of it to be fair, probably, but so far, when I saw that, I was like, how in the world did the Grey's Anatomy writers do this Rebel thing? And I'm expecting it to be as good as Grey's. I don't know. I'm a little confused, but...
Shonda is a hard-working writer-producer. She makes a lot of different shows in a lot of different places. And then hires teams. So she usually comes up with the concept and then leaves a team behind. So
okay, that makes sense.
Conceptually, her shows they're of a variety of quality. I think that her big one right now is Bridgerton. If you're watching that kind of stuff, she created Bridgerton on Netflix.
I love that show.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar enough with Shonda Land to be able to pass judgment one way or another, but I do think she traffics in the same brand of sensationalism that is done throughout all of these shows, because every show she does, all the exact same people that I know.
Oh, the Shonda Land roller coaster, and that's what her production thing actually is.
Every single one. I'm not saying those aren't enjoyable. I personally haven't gotten into any of those shows besides when I used to watch Grey's Anatomy, but for me, I think that is a bit of a turnoff, the fact that all of my same friends all watch these shows. I feel like whatever you're doing, you're just moving this thing, the Shonda element. You're just moving that from premise to premise. I don't necessarily think that's something that's going to grab me.
Yeah.
I've watched almost every Shonda.
Well, there you go. See, you love those, but you also love Once Upon a Time, and you enjoy The Good Doctor, at least at this point. So that's how I know those are like good, genuine connections. It's not just you and me kind of being both on the same wavelength. We can tell that these shows are pulling us from different TV pools, and I think that's what kind of gives them a little bit more snap. But I was thinking one of the other strengths of the show is that it doesn't, unlike Monk, lean so heavily on its main character that has the interesting thing about him. We have two surgical teams, whether the other team is being led by Andrews or some other random doctor that's on for one episode, or by Dr. Lim, who I also really I liked her straight out of the gate. I don't know, she just had panache. She stays on the show for a good amount of time. It's not like Sean only has the one case per episode. There's always another case. Their characters are dealing with that, so it's not, the world doesn't revolve around Sean. The episode may start with him and end with him, but there's, I think, plenty of meat in each episode for other characters to where it's not a LeBron James situation where if he goes down, we got nothing else. Like he's all we got. I think it's a decently rounded show.
Yeah.
In terms of load bearing.
So just to close the book on the Shonda show, soapy, sexy, fine. If you like that, I'm all for it. I just don't need it all in the medical setting anymore. Done. As far as David Shore, I think he's earned some cred for me to keep continuing to explore his stuff. I never watched House consistently either. I like Hugh Laurie though, and I like a lot of the people in the cast. I probably will at some point if somebody's really emphatic about wanting to talk about it, but I don't see any reason why I wouldn't pick up a David Shore show, just because he seems to think through his ensembles very, very well, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that piece that he's able to bring to the table, as he gets good dialogue and good dynamics in the people that they cast. So, how would you say The Good Doctor compares to other TV shows? I don't know why that says romantic family dramas. It should say medical dramas.
I was concerned about that as well.
I might copy and paste the boilerplate and forget to change some stuff. How does... I mean, we did compare this already to, like, some things like Grey's and ER, but, you know, if there's any other comparisons you want to throw out for The Good Doctor.
As I said, the only other medical drama that I watch at the moment is New Amsterdam, and they both kind of started up in similar timelines. I think New Amsterdam is maybe a year or two behind. But I don't know exactly how to explain the difference between them. I think that The Good Doctor is very focused and feels a little bit... It's hard to say because they're both... The stakes, I mean, it's the medical drama show stakes. The stakes are always pretty high. Mm-hmm. But... yeah, I think it's more that The Good Doctor feels very focused and very, like, on these core issues. These are specific problems, where New Amsterdam feels a lot more open. It's like the difference between being in a study room or, like, a study hall. It's just... I don't know. There's not as much of a ceiling on New Amsterdam, and I kind of like the freedom that gives them. But, yeah, I don't think that was a very helpful answer. That's my answer.
And you're sticking to it.
I have to say that the newest medical drama, I guess I've watched, and I only watched because I thought it was going to be a tragic, like, disaster, is Nurses, which is on NBC. And it started the same exact way this show did. Like, it was very dramatic.
What's the thing of the person that makes everybody go, I don't know about this person?
I guess the biggest premise is that, like, which as a nurse I understand, like, the whole first, like, half of the season is the nurses are literally saying we don't get the credit that we deserve because the doctors get everything. So, like, pretty much they're stabbing at every other show that there's, like, nurses on every other show, but they don't get any credit. So,
fair,
like...
but I feel like, how have we not mentioned Scrubs at all this whole episode? A travesty. Because that actually, very, very comedic show, but the medical drama on that show, quality. Quality stuff. I'll defend Scrubs till the end of the world.
Love Scrubs, actually.
And yeah, and I think they had very good nurse presence on that show. Better than most medical dramas.
Better than most. But, like, I mean, in real life, like, that's the premise that the show came out on, and now it's starting to branch out to, like, oh, I like you, I'm in love with you, and now nurses are falling in love with nurses, and all that fun jazz. But, I mean, I guess, like, I would have to say, for being a medical person, I've watched a lot of medical shows, which I don't know why, but I guess. My biggest thing is I like to debunk them. I like to look at things and be like, yep, that's not going to happen in real life, but good job. That's actually not really a oxygen cannula.
Were there any big glaring, that's just flat out wrongs from season 1 of The Good Doctor?
I can say yes, because it happens in almost everyone. It's how they use their IV pump, because, like, they don't have... It's really hard to make... Most medical dramas use, like, fake arms, so it looks like they have, like, the IV in, but, like, most of them have, like, a piece of tape on their arm and, like, looking like something's sticking out, and then the IV pump's on the other side of the room. Where I'm like, okay.
How's it get over there?
Yeah, also, like, shows... I mean, The Good Doctor doesn't, but Grey's Anatomy has done it really bad with this in the past, is trachs. When people are on vents, because, I mean, if you don't have a hole in, like, it's really hard to, like, pretend, but, so that's the biggest thing. That's the reason why I watch medical shows, but, yeah, so I have to say, medical shows just start the same exact way. It's just being dramatic. I guess that's all I got. I'm sorry, I kind of circled there.
I don't feel qualified to answer this question, because this is not, I'm watching this show in this genre right now because of this fine panel.
Aw,
well,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. We love you.
You're welcome.
But, yeah. So, yeah. I only watch medical dramas to debunk them.
Oh. That's a nice one. So before I ask the $1 million question, is there anything else that you want to mention that you haven't mentioned before I ask that $1 million question? That, because we have a responsibility to our listeners and to the TV watching public at large as far as our opinion. But
we gotta be consistent.
What?
I said we gotta be consistent.
That's right. We do. We have to be.
That's why we have the $1 million question.
We have traditions here on Couch Potatoes Unite.
We do. We don't have $1 million though, so I don't want to hit on the $1 million question. Is there anything else that you want to say that we haven't already said about the first season of The Good Doctor?
Yes, I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't brought in what is now one of my favorite characters. Obviously, gets a lot more into the second season, probably more screen time, but Leah, I think her name is Piette.
Yeah.
Honestly, here's the scenario with her. You know that at some point they're going to try to bring in some sort of a potential love interest or whatever. Leah, I found from the beginning, was a very, very interesting character. I've met people similar to Leah, and her personality was one that I particularly liked.
Point of clarification. Unless I'm very much mistaken, I have not met a Leah yet.
She was the first neighbor, not the Christelian
thank you.
neighbor.
The one that he sort of kind of dates in a way?
Kinda.
Okay, continue.
Oh, well, you know what? I think maybe this speaks a little bit to how little they really developed anything around her in this season. So, sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks for the reminder.
Those were a good couple of episodes. The road trip episode.
I just wanted to say... I just wanted to say that, from the beginning, because I catch on to these things, and I like to be able to kind of imagine where they're going with a character. And I'll be completely honest with you, with Leah at this point, obviously with the first season, very little. But even what you did learn, I think there was an episode where they went away with a car and an adventure. I really loved that. But it was very hard for me in the beginning to figure out what are they going to do with her. Like, how would if there was potentially an interest there, how would this work? It just seems like it could work, but I was very interested. What are they going to do with this person? Is this just going to be a good friend? Is it going to be a love interest? What's going to happen? So that's something for you to keep watching for. But I just wanted to mention her because I guess maybe it's rubbing off that I love her now, and there's more to learn from her in the future.
Because I was going to say, I forgot completely about her, and I felt it's because they hurried her off to her wherever she went back to and didn't really mention her again for the rest of the season.
That was heartbreaking to me because I could see stuff in the beginning, and so it was more dramatic for me than obviously you.
And I forgot that her name was Leah.
There was one little throw in, and I think a few episodes after she left, where he saw an Instagram post from her that said, it was a picture of pine trees and said, "Smelling pine trees, thinking of you," as a vague post. But he was like, "I know who that's for. It's for me. I'm Mr. Pine Tree," which I thought was nice. I'll say, speaking from the future, for those of you who are going kind of along as the podcast goes, Sean's love life, I think, is done in a very, very deliberate and measured way. Regardless of who the participants are, I think it's something that's done and handled very well. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, obviously, his autism does come into play at certain times, but I think it's also just handled as, this guy's in his mid to late 20s, hasn't had relationships before, this time in his life where things are happening. That comes with its own set of pitfalls, regardless of who you are. That's always going to be something that, instills drama. So I think once again, the balance between, do we attribute this trait to his autism, or is this just him because he's a guy? He's just a person living life, stays pretty good. And on that note, the thing I wanted to say is that regardless of where we land as a viewing community at large about Freddie Highmore playing this autistic character, I find value in the show regardless, in just ways that he'll do something, or he'll be interested in something, or he'll want to get something, and I'll ask myself, are they trying to be hey, autistic people like this stuff too? And then I'm jumping back from that, I'm why am I thinking about that as if I know? Why am I assuming one way or another that a person with autism would or wouldn't want either of these things. I mean, they even have an episode where there is one of the patients is on the spectrum, and the mom kind of does this, like, shutdown thing of, like, I understand that he has different faculties, but at the end of the day, they're both autistic, and that's just a non-starter. Like, there's something we can't get past. That obviously is not the case, so that's something that I'm kind of, like, growing with as I watch the show as well, of, like, every person with autism is an individual as much as anybody else. There are no sweeping one-size-fits-all rules, and I need to let go of kind of those generalizations and assumptions. I think the show helps with that little bit by little bit.
This teaches that everybody's their individual person, no matter what you are, who you are, or how you're living life.
The more you know.
Are we going to start singing now?
We already did, Jared.
Hopefully, The Good Doctor never makes the mistake that Grey's Anatomy did.
No, musical
I've only
episode.
seen one episode past where I dropped off, and it was the musical episode, and it's one of the worst things I've ever seen on television ever. And Eddie, if you got other opinions, let's keep our friendship where it's at. Because
I was just gonna say my favorite musical medical drama episode was actually on Scrubs.
I was gonna say the Scrubs one is really
so
good.
This is for both the Grey's panel, which is upcoming, and the Scrubs panel, which we're still working on. Both just. And maybe someday we'll do best musical episodes of the TV and worst. But for right now, I'm going to ask...
I'd love to be on that. That'd be so fun.
For right now, I'm going to ask the heretofore previewed $1 million question. Would you recommend The Good Doctor to others? Why or why not?
No.
Okay, but why not?
Only because if you're watching The Good Doctor for a medical drama, I feel like you're going to be let down. Because I don't look at The Good Doctor as a medical drama. I look at it as a show. I feel like it's more of a drama. It's not a medical drama. But if you're looking at it as something that's different and how they tackle something that is kind of taboo to tackle in TV land, I guess if that's what we want to call it, it's something different. I guess this would be good for someone to watch. It's something different. It's something that we haven't seen be tackled this way, and then I guess it would be good. But as a person who likes medical dramas, apparently, because I've seen so many of them, I would not recommend The Good Doctor. It's not on my top of the list.
I would recommend it just for something new. I mean, give it a shot, and if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. But that's my 2 cents on it. It's something different.
I would recommend it too. It doesn't need to fit any other bill other than it's super entertaining, and there's no major issues with it that could ruin your life, but there's lots of great stuff in it that could lighten up your life.
I, in talking about doing this podcast later today, recommended this show to my coworkers this morning, so I'm pretty that decision's been made. For the why, I think the biggest thing, and this was not something that we had with Once Upon a Time at all, was that I think this show is still very accessible. I think it's something that is easy to pick up and isn't necessary. I don't think it's so detail oriented like some like Game of Thrones or House of Cards, to where if you have your phone out you will miss the detail and everything will fall. Like this is a show that I think finds a good balance of being a 40-minute drama but not demanding every ounce of brain power that you have to watch it. It's also only completed 4 seasons. I'm not saying The Greys isn't something people should watch, but I'm saying when you look at it, you can't just see it for, let me start the season 1. You know that it is a monster that has grown larger. It's the Godzilla of TV shows. I don't know any other show that started during my lifetime that is still going, that has done. They surpassed Supernatural, what no one thought could be done. They outlasted The Boys. Like, Grey's Anatomy is, it's honestly, it's its own empire. It could probably eat and swallow all the other Shondaland things and still survive. It's like a mountain to climb. I'm not disparaging it. For me, when I think about, because Netflix will pop up the little thing like, hey, you want to watch Grey's Anatomy? I'm like, that, based on the way that I have watched only Stargate SG-1 for the past 5 weeks, despite wanting to watch many other things, because I'm stuck in there. If I started Grey's Anatomy, you would never see me again. You'd see me on the show, get absorbed into, I'd get Wonka visioned into the Shondaland, and that would be the end of Micah, so.
Simpsons is the only other show that's currently on that's been on longer than...
I think Simpsons is older than me.
Simpsons is older.
Late
I would say to guess that it's at least 2 to 3 years older than you.
Simpsons has been on 32 years.
I'm a year older than The Simpsons.
Same.
I think that show's a
I'm
little
10
long in
years
the
older
tooth.
than The Simpsons.
Well, see, then you were in the sweet spot because you were a 10-year-old kid right when Bart Simpson became a thing. That had to be just like the greatest time to be alive. Who is this little dude upsetting every adult I know? Gotta get in on that.
I was busy watching the Turtles.
So hashtag Micah's rants. We had one. I feel like this episode pretty much rounded out in completeness. An answer to the question beforehand, though, would I recommend it? I will give a qualified, very narrowly defined yes. You'd have to be a fan of Freddie Highmore, or you'd have to be a fan of, I'm not going to say medical dramas. You have to be a fan of medical drama. You don't have to be a fan of medical dramas generally. You probably should be a fan of something like House, though, because I think the show does have David Shore's stamp on it, even though it doesn't have a sarcastic, drug-addicted doctor at the helm. It does kind of have sort of the bone structure of House and how the different characters relate to each other, some of the snappy dialogue, some of the internal antagonisms. I think that stuff is similar, and probably the most translatable experience would be a House fan to this show. Not necessarily a Grey's, Private Practice, ER, etc., etc. Though thank you, Micah, for your nod to Supernatural. I know how you feel. Don't care. Supernatural for life. SPN family. P.S.
Yep, still got two episodes left. Can't bring myself to do it.
Oh.
Not ready for it to end.
Jensen Ackles, if you're randomly listening to this episode, tweet at CPO Podcast because I love you. Okay.
I have a story for when we're done.
Oh,
about
fair enough.
Supernatural.
Okay. Is there anything else you wish to say that we haven't said about the first season of Good Doctor?
I have said my piece.
Has
Although if you
everybody...
want access to Jessica's after podcast rant, feel free to hop on that Patreon and give us your money. Give us your money. If you want your money, give it to us. Give us that money.
Podcast afterthoughts.
That's a lot, but we'll work on that idea.
Couch potatoes after hours.
Potatoes after dark.
Okay. So
Couch potatoes deep fried.
this is getting weird because of what show we're talking about. So since we're getting weird, what I'd like to do is thank Jessica, Micah, Jared, and Eddie for joining me to talk about the first season of Good Doctor. Now, don't you worry. This is a catching up series. We have 3 more seasons to talk about. So if you're a fan of this show, or even if you're not, keep on with us. But for right now, it's time for those credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, The Good Doctor is entirely available to stream on Hulu and apparently on YouTube TV for those who can't get Hulu, all my friends in Canada. In the meantime, our Good Doctor panel will next reconvene very shortly, in fact, to talk Season 2 and Episode 2 of our 4-part catch-up series. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye-bye!